Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 369 for Monday, September 29th, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft. This podcast is probably going to be all about Minecraft Live. We go out on all podcast platforms, including a video version on YouTube and on Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, as always, in fresh modern media, it's Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
And being involved in Minecraft media and steeped in media, we spent the render distance talking about how we consume media, the streaming services we're using, the fact that we lament the lack of physical discs sometimes when we want to watch our favorite films and they're on a streaming service that we no longer subscribe to. If you want to hear more about that, then check out the render distance. It's the extended version of the program. You can get it at the Spawn Chunks on Patreon, and it is one of the many things that you get as a bonus there. You can partake in the monthly Minecraft Hangouts. We just had one on September 27th before covering Minecraft Live, and that is where we talk with our patrons about what they've been doing in Minecraft. Very similar to the login here on the show, but with you folks instead of with just Johnny and I talking about what we've been doing. The quarterly hangout is coming up in October. That's where we review the downloads, the numbers, the subscriptions, all that kind of stuff, as well as future plans for the show. And speaking of plans for the show, something we talked about in the last quarterly, or at least a special Patreon hangout that we did, the Patreon feed is now syncing with Spotify. So if you are a Patreon member and you are using Spotify to listen to the show on a regular basis, you can now sign in to Patreon via Spotify, and you can get access to the render distance, the Hangouts, all those things right in Spotify. So if you prefer Spotify as a platform, you now have access to that. It's worth noting that it's a separate RSS feed. So if you're looking to listen to everything, including the main version of the show, which is public, then you have to look for the Spawn Chunks as a separate RSS feed. And again, sign in with your Patreon account. If you have any issues, drop me a line in the Discord and I will hopefully send you to the right help article. Or there's also a few other people that have done it already, and then you might be able to find some help there. But either way, we are syncing on Spotify.
Yes, and we're going to sync up our thoughts about Minecraft Live in today's discussion. Minecraft Live September 2025 happened over the weekend, brought us a look at what's coming in the final drop for 2025, so that's definitely going to be the focus of this week's news and discussion. But before all that, we've got to stay in the present and talk about what we've been up to in our Minecraft Lives. So aside from covering that on the weekend, Joel, what have you been up to in Minecraft?
This week has just been a lot of planning. There's been the remainder of the lighting ups of the Lush Cave. So it's all lit up. I'm not seeing any mobs spawning in places that I don't particularly want them. The idea was that I wanted to put a mob farm down there. And so I took the time to fly around with the camera mod that I have, which is mostly for screenshots, but it does make it easy to like fly up against the edge of a cave, mark down the X, Y, Z coordinates, and then go to the other end and like basically kind of triangulate and figure out where the center of the cave is. And it worked out that the center of the cave is actually right above one of the deeper sections, which is cool, but it's also one of the more pretty sections. And so like, I don't know if I want to put the mob farm kind of like blocking the view. So there's another section with a hole on the bottom that goes into a deep slate cavern. And so I think I'm going to put the mob farm over there. But the Lush Cave is pretty large. It's about 130 blocks by 130 blocks. And I did not mention or measure the vertical. The vertical is easily that. It's got to be between 70. Well, yeah, the vertical is about 100 blocks. But it's not a wide open space. It's kind of shaped like an L. So there's limited space as to like what you could put kind of centrally. But either way, we sort of found the center. And because of the way that the cavern was discovered, it is kind of a pain to get to. So what I did was I dug out, I think it's about like a 5 or 7 block diameter tube that goes right from the surface of the Mushroom Island down into the ceiling of the cave, right in the middle. And so now with the Elytra, it's very easy to just jump in the cave. It is deep enough that it's very easy to catch yourself and fly around. And then if you have to exit, you can easily just take off, fly around, aim up, one rocket, and you shoot through the, 20 or 30 blocks of the tunnel and pop out of the Mushroom Island. So it's a lot easier to access now, which is great. And I'm on the fence because I do want to have a mob farm in there. It seems kind of silly to not, considering it's one of the only places that you can spawn anything on the Mushroom Island. But the more I think about it and the more I think about the drops, like I don't need bones, I don't need string, I don't need certainly zombie flesh. So really, I might be leaning on doing a creeper farm because I have been going through rockets like it's going out of style because the Mushroom Island is huge and, for the lack of a better way to say it, boring. Like, it's not as cool to walk around like Westhill. Westhill, when I went for a road trip to get more stuff, I would walk it because I had spent all that time building it. It was kind of cool to walk by all the different things, the landscapes, the farms, the cliffs, and then go to, the little teleport blocks that we have on the server. So it was way more interesting to do that than it was to fly over it. This, though, it's just like you just want to get from point A to point B. So I think maybe a creeper farm and a sugarcane farm might be the first thing that I kind of do, so that when I do need more rockets, I'm not constantly going somewhere else on the server to get some. So that's kind of where I'm thinking now with that mob farm. I also have been messing around with the design because I want it to have like a central drop shoot. A lot of mob farms have the water dispensers in the middle and they shoot the mobs off the side. And from a design perspective, visually, I want to have them like drop into some sort of like cool furnace thing. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I want it to look sci-fi, and I think it would be more fun to have everything central. So that's on the docket. Where I was doing the measuring for the Lush Cave, I also thought, I'm going to measure the island. I want to know how big it is. Well, turns out it's roughly 700 blocks by 700 blocks. Like, this is a large island.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's big. And so I found like the mathematical center for the sake of the physical island. The biome extends a little bit into the oceans in different directions, but I kind of went to like the eastmost, westmost, north and southmost blocks that I could stand on and found the center. And then I also kind of nudged that around because where that was in the middle of not a low-lying land, but like a relatively flat area within the Mushroom Island. But within the landscape, it was still a little bit too close to one side as far as some mountains and stuff. So I kind of nudged it around to what I felt was more of the visual middle. So the physical center is still there, but I'm off by 40 blocks just because I felt it looked better and might provide, a better way for me to access the island. And so I moved the arrival location. So previously I had just kind of picked a spot near what I thought was an interesting cave. And now when you use the teleport block, command block on the server to get to the island, you arrive right in the middle. And I've set up shulker boxes and chests and a crafting station and the kind of staging area that you'd want in this sort of section. And it's just loose. I don't have any screenshots because it's not the most exciting thing. And I don't know yet what I'm going to do from a design perspective, which is why I haven't really gone into any kind of build, because I just don't know what the color palettes are going to be. I don't want to have to undo everything if I do it in a way that I'm not interested in keeping. So I'm kind of just doing all the technical legwork in the area to kind of like wait to see what might grab me. And right now the plan is just to try to think about the farms. I did bring in a shulker, and I did that through a data pack. The Voodoo Beard Shulker Mite data pack is something we've had on the server for quite some time. And it was to cater to some of the server mates that really were uncomfortable going to the End Islands, but really wanted to take advantage of shulker boxes. So the Coles Notes version is that you spawn an Endermite the same way that you normally would on purpur. And if it is on purpur for long enough, it will burrow into the purpur and turn the purpur block into a shulker, which you can then kill and take the shells from. And so I did that. I basically made a purpur swimming pool and started throwing ender pearls around and got a endermite, and then it turned into a shulker, which I named just to make sure that it wouldn't despawn, although apparently they don't despawn anyway. So I have one, and it felt a little cheaty. Like, it really felt outside of the vanilla gameplay, but because of the location of this Mushroom Island and the way that you have to bring shulkers back from the end, like, I was 35,000 by 53,000 blocks away from spawn. So to bring a shulker back into the overworld at that location, even to go in the nether, I was looking at something like 10 to 14 hours of like transporting a shulker box alive through the nether, I hope. And I was like, I'm not digging a tunnel for however long that is.
Yeah.
And on the server, one of the things we don't do is go up on the nether roof, because that would be the other option, right? Would be just like grab the shulker, somehow get it onto the nether roof, and just like put in the legwork to move it. And it just didn't seem like a good use of my time. So because the data pack was on the server, it was a little too easy to maybe get a shulker where I wanted it to be. But the other alternative would be to just build the shulker farm in the end next to an end city where you only have to move the shulkers a few blocks. But then you don't get to show off that build. You don't get to really decorate it. It's not going to be seen all that much. And then I still have to move the shelves around. So I decided to just move the shulker or create the shulker in that way because of the data pack. And I will create the farm around it somehow, and then hopefully create what I want to do is create like a shulker box factory so that I can create like I can get wood that turns into chests. I can craft, like I want to do the whole crafter sequence so that I don't have to actually go collect shulker shells. I'm just going to collect finished shulker boxes when I need them. So I'm hoping that it's something that can come together relatively easily, but it looks like the scaffolding method is going to be the best way to go. So there's lots of technical things happening right now on the Citadel.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's good to have little farm projects and stuff like that. A shulker farm is still one I've never cracked myself, just because in a single-player world, typically, I don't have a need for more shulker boxes than I can go out to the end and get, and more often than not in the past, I've just ended up resetting chunks of the end because it's something that I can show single-player world users how to do, and that becomes useful in case they add new content in future, or, you know, people just want to reset end cities for the sake of, you know, getting elytra when it's too far to go for their last pair and they dropped it into lava by accident or something. So, yeah, a shulker farm is never one I've cracked before, but I will probably have a go at it at some stage, purely for automated storage stuff now, especially with the crafter. Like, I think the crafter is one of those things where if you want to just stash away boxes and boxes of stuff, it's very easy to have things running in the background. Doubly so now we have things like random ticks happening in just loaded chunks, not chunks that the player is nearby. So I can easily see stuff like crop growth being more automated and having stuff that, you know, just packs away in shulker boxes for when I need it. On the subject of the crafter, actually, I was going to say, when you talk about the mob farm and not needing certain resources from a more general mob farm, I totally understand that aspect of it, but consider in your calculations that string can be auto-crafted into stuff like wool, and if you need a lot of wool for building stuff in your sci-fi area, that could be a viable thing. If nothing else, just to save you the struggle of trying to spawn-proof a farm from spiders but still let creepers spawn, which is something that I've generally just sort of shrugged at and decided I'll deal with the spiders because the rates are usually good enough anyway. And then bones can always be broken down into bone meal and then crafted into bone blocks, which you could build with, but I'm sure you have a decent bone farm elsewhere that you could already do stuff like that with. So I would say don't count it out entirely, and the crafter can probably help with a lot of stuff like that, but I feel like that's more advice for the general audience rather than you, because I feel like this is all stuff you already know.
Well, it's something that I was considering and struggling, honestly, because we've got a couple of data packs on the server that involve string and wool, and I couldn't remember which was vanilla and which was
right,
like
yeah. String into
pack.
wool is vanilla. Wool into string is the data
String
pack.
is the data pack. Yeah, exactly. So
yeah,
and we have other things, like, I mean, we're also on a server that's 8 years old, so like there is a triple cave spider spawner at spawn. If I really want to go get a lot of string, like I could just go there. But we also have a sheep farm there too, and I think from a building perspective for wool resources in the sci-fi area, plus it would be so colorful, would be to make a sheep farm, like an automated sheep farm for me. But you're right, like there are other things that I could do with string. Like, I mean, not that I need more leads, but just things like, you know, leads or bows or other things that I might want to do with string. I was thinking about making it a creeper farm, but then not worrying about the spiders, like not spider proofing it, because I wanted to use water to flush them, the mobs out. And so if I did that, I wouldn't be able to use like carpet or anything to block the spider spawn. So I just have to deal with them another way. We do have a spider spawner in a dungeon under the lush cave. But again, that's not going to be active unless I'm standing there.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I want something that's going to be active as I'm building around the island, not something I have to physically AFK at so much. So yeah, that's the plan, is to try to sort out what I want to do with the mob farm. I think it's probably going to be creeper related. I don't know if I'm going to do water or cats. If I use cats, well, then I can make it spider proof and just do the creeper thing. And maybe that could be a better way to go, rather than just doing a general mob farm. If I did a farm for every kind of mob that I would want, it gives me more build opportunities. Rather than one kind of farm to bring them all, I can just, you know, make a spider farm elsewhere, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, while you've been exploring a natural lush cave, I have been digging an artificial one because work is currently continuing in Survival Guide on the massive area I have to dig out to build this underground copper aging machine. With the copper age only hours away at this point, I feel like I'm still behind schedule on that, but it's something that I can work on over time, and I'll definitely need to grind real hard for the redstone that I need for this kind of project. But either way, I am currently cutting through a geode right now. That's the point of the floor we've got into, where we're deep enough that geodes have started to generate. And there are going to be several layers of caves below where I'm at. I'm trying to get it from roughly Y28 down to about Y0, which is the point at which I'll just get sick of mining deep slate. And I'll probably do a couple of layers with moss towards the end and then just call it a day once we hit 0, and maybe cut up a little bit of headroom above that if we need it. But I got distracted in the middle of that by making a couple of YouTube shorts this week, one of which is me deep diving trial vault mechanics again, because I still get people who think you can time when you input the key to get specific results. You can't. I've tried. I did all of the maths. I watched a vault for 5 minutes, recorded the results to prove that there wasn't a pattern, and also looked into it, and loot is determined by the world seed the same way that like chest loot is. So if you load up the same world seed multiple times, you get the same results from the same vault regardless of when you put the key in. So it's pretty much cut and dry at this point, but there are still some people who are weirdly superstitious about stuff in Minecraft, believe it or not. The other thing I got distracted by was creating an upside down witch riding a chicken, and this is because chat basically dared me to. So ZF has done this on Hermitcraft recently, so it's certainly by no means a secret of the game, but sometimes you know how you'll get, obviously chicken jockeys are a well-known thing at this point and popularized lately by the Minecraft movie. You get zombie villager chicken jockeys occasionally. So it turns out that you can still cure those zombie villagers while they're riding the chickens, and when they get cured, the villager does not get off the chicken. So you can end up with a baby villager riding around on a chicken, which will grow up into a fully grown villager still riding around on a chicken.
Wow.
Which is hilarious in itself, and does mean that you can lead the chicken around using a lead, so it's actually a handy way of moving villagers, as long as the villager isn't forced to dismount the chicken by anything. The fun part about that is that that villager is still subject to stuff like transforming with lightning, and so if you can get it struck by lightning, position a lightning rod far enough away from the chicken that it's not going to hurt the chicken, but the lightning strike still hits the villager, it turns into a witch. And finally, you Dinnerbone name tag that witch to turn it upside down, and then you have a witch doing a headstand on a chicken. And it's the funniest thing I've seen in Minecraft for a while. I did this all in creative because I figured it was a fast way to just showcase the fact that you can do it on stream. Made a tidy little YouTube short out of it, and then pledged to do this in the Minecraft Survival Guide at some point. I don't know exactly when, and I think waiting around for the stuff to spawn and for the thunderstorm to happen and stuff is probably going to be the hardest part of it. But in looking into the way Zadaf did it, what I learned was that it's actually more common for zombie villager variants to spawn in old growth pine taiga biomes, which is something I never realized about the game before. Normally there are 5% chance from any zombie spawn. In mega taigas, they are a 20% chance from any zombie spawn. So 1 in 5 zombies there is going to be a zombie villager, which means 1 in 5 chicken jockeys there is going to be a zombie villager chicken jockey. And that's, odds that I can play. Like, that's something that I can at least take into account when it comes to trying to get these mechanics to work in my favor in future.
Hopefully you'll have better luck than the skeletal wolf on the Minecraft server that you were on.
The 1 in 1,000 chance that took me well over 1,000 tries, yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that zombie villagers in lush caves is higher than average too. I don't know if it's 20%, but I killed several in the 2 or 3 streams it took me to light up that lush cave. And I was thinking to myself, like, oh, this is good to know. Like, if I want to get villagers to this island, if it's problematic to transport them from a nearby village, which shouldn't be, because like when you think about the nearby biomes and taking a nether portal to bring villagers across, like the tunnel really wouldn't be that long.
Yeah.
Because you'd only be looking at 70 or 80 blocks. So it wouldn't be too bad to get villagers to the island, because a trading hall would also be something I'd want to do on the island, and curing zombie villagers would be an option, and so the lush cave might be a good source for that. So I'm not sure, like if you have a lush cave on Survival Guide, like it might be worth looking in to see what you get for spawns there too.
Yeah, I won't get the lightning down there, unfortunately. That's the
No, fair.
the second part of the equation. But yeah, definitely worth a look for sure. Speaking of new stuff that we've encountered in Minecraft, we should really move into talking about Minecraft Live September 2025. You'll find a recap of all of the announcements on Minecraft.net. That's going to be linked in our show notes as well. And that was, of course, published on Saturday, September 27th, right after the announcements streamed at Minecraft Live. We will also have links to the 3 most relevant YouTube videos as far as announcements go. The full stream will be there. We've also got the first look at the spear and the Nautilus, which is more generally the Mobs of Mayhem drop coming later this year, and also all about the Copper Age with the announcement that, along with a roundup of features arriving in the Copper Age and some insights from the developers and sound designers, the Copper Age gameplay drop is going to release tomorrow, Tuesday, September 30th. Mobs of Mayhem was unveiled. There's also a separate article which goes into more of a breakdown of some of those features, but it began with the announcement of the Nautilus, an aquatic mob that can be tamed, after which players can saddle and ride it. Riding the Nautilus gives players the Breath of the Nautilus effect, which pauses the breath gauge while underwater. It can also perform a dash and even leap out of the water while on the surface, although it won't survive long on land. Nautilus armor was also announced, which will be available as loot from chests and comes in copper, iron, gold, diamond, and netherite variants. A zombie Nautilus variant can also spawn with a drowned riding it. These are neutral mobs when not being steered by a drowned. The zombie horse is also being introduced to survival for the first time as a regular nighttime spawn with a zombie rider in certain biomes. That rider can wield another new addition that was announced, the spear. The spear will be craftable with many different tiers of material, and it has 2 attacks, a jab, and a charge. The charged attack deals more damage the faster you are traveling, making it more effective when, for example, used on a mount or flying with elytra. Higher tiers of material are considered heavier, though, so the charge attack will be more powerful, but the timing needs to be more precise. Also featured at this Minecraft Live, we had a celebration of the Happy Ghast through an animated music video, an announcement of a Dragon Ball Z DLC coming soon to the Minecraft Marketplace for Bedrock Edition, and a segment Stories from Minecraft, in which a young architect, a visual artist, and an older lady with a passion for crochet talk about how Minecraft has affected their lives. If you would like to see our first-time reactions to Minecraft Live September 2025, the VOD of that is now available to watch over at youtube.com/thespawnchunks.
In addition to Minecraft Live, leading up to the release of the Copper Age tomorrow, there were some more bug fixes to the Copper Age. Minecraft Java Edition 1.21.9 pre-release 4 was published on Tuesday, September 23rd, just after our show last week. The UI changes. The debug options screen is now accessible using the F3 plus F6 buttons instead of the previous F3 plus F5. This resolves an issue where Mac keyboards couldn't use the keyboard shortcut. Notable bug fixes include that conduits didn't have the block-breaking animation, shields with patterns had no enchantment glint when enchanted, mobs have visual glitches all over them, player heads do not glow, and bugs on ranged weapons. Minecraft Java Edition 1.21.9 Release Candidate 1 was published on Thursday, September 25th, just ahead of Minecraft Live. Just a couple of bug fixes here. Creakings can spawn with the spawn monsters game rule set to false, and the texture in the middle of conduits is upside down. Those bugs have been fixed. Links to both of these changelogs, along with the announcements from Minecraft Live, can be found in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
So, of course, we're going to save our thoughts for Mobs of Mayhem for the main discussion this week. But the main thing I will say here while we're in the news segment is I'm surprised we learned the name of this drop right away. It kind of goes the opposite direction to how we've been treating these drops previously, where the name is either something that they workshop with the community or it's something they hold back on until we know all of the features that are coming in the drop, and they've sort of worked on the name behind the scenes. This one, they announced it right away. It was almost one of the first things they talked about, along with like all of the rideable stuff. I mean, the Nautilus and the zombie horse particularly. So, yeah, how do you feel about the name, and how do you feel about knowing the name so soon, Joel?
Well, I think it helps with talking about it on the show, because we'd be calling it the Winter Drop 2025 or whatever temporary name Mojang would have given it. And I think that That giving it a name right away allows us to talk about it specifically for the foreseeable future, and then you can separate, snapshots for Mounts of Mayhem versus pre-release and snapshots for the Copper Age. If, for example, in the future, the most recent or the upcoming drop, like the Copper Age, was not coming out tomorrow, like if that still had a couple more weeks of development, it would be easier to discern between the two of them if they both had separate names and it was designed by Mojang. I will say that the name itself is a little surprising given the content, and I won't dive into the content here because we're going to talk about that later, but Mounts of Mayhem suggest multiple mounts and Mayhem, neither of which are in the features that they released. Like the one new mount, the Nautilus, it's not a action mount. Like it's basically like flying around in water on a happy gas for building. Like it's not really something that's action packed per se. The spear has some action, but again, like you're using that on existing mounts. So I and even then, it's not like you can use it on all of them. So I don't know. I feel like the Mounts of Mayhem is a little bit of a strange title for me. I feel like there's a lot of hype around Minecraft Live, and it's still at the level where Minecraft Live was these big sweeping announcements like the Nether update and the Caves and Cliffs update, where they're announcing sweeping changes to the game. And I understand from a marketing perspective, like Mojang still has to be positive and enthusiastic about these drops, but like the name and the enthusiasm around this month's Minecraft Live was kind of portrayed as very high, and then what they delivered was cool but not at the same level. So there's a disparity there that I think that they need to kind of address, because the Mounts of Mayhem, to me, if I said that to somebody that didn't play Minecraft and didn't watch this weekend, I don't think that they would come up with what we actually get in Mounts of Mayhem. So now, that said, there could be changes. Like what they've announced at Minecraft Live could be just what they know that they can do. And if there are other ideas that they might do if they have time, then we might see more stuff in development throughout the snapshots. They've surprised us in snapshots before, but like I said, I don't know if that's really the best way to market it, because it seems to be and sounds a lot more exciting than it actually is, in my opinion.
I think it's a matter of timing, really, because we know that this is probably the shortest amount of time in the year that we get between the announcement of one of these drops and its actual release. Like the amount of snapshots we'll get between now and early December is probably going to be like 7-8 weeks at most, and then probably like a week of pre-releases and then it's out. So there's not a huge amount of time to test a lot of this stuff, and hopefully it's gone through a decent amount of internal testing before this. I'd say the features seem like reasonably polished, at least. But yeah, I think it's also the fact that the Copper Age wasn't out yet, and so there's this odd sort of like handover period, and so they don't have a whole lot to announce as they sort of ramp down from that towards the end of the year. But part of the announcements was, hey, the Copper Age is coming out tomorrow, which if you're reasonably smart and have your ear to the ground like we do, you sort of knew that already. Like, we've been assuming that with pre-releases and a release candidate out this week, there's no way it wasn't coming tomorrow. So yeah, it feels like a little bit of an anticlimax in that extent, but of course, now that they're doing 2 of these a year, they have to time those to the certain sort of release schedule that they have. And so I wonder if they'd be better served doing an end of year show saying, here's what's coming up, or a start of year show saying, here's what's coming up for like the first 2 months of 2026, and then doing a mid-year, like a big kind of summer show, and being like, glad you're really enjoying those, summer is here, here's what we have coming up for the next 2 drops or the next drop then, and so that it doesn't feel like we're being handed sort of like the last portion of something going into like the winter holiday break.
Yeah, I think a lot of that seems to be the reluctance to overpromise. Right?
Yeah,
like they
of course.
don't want to say, here's our roadmap, and then something comes up where they don't meet that roadmap, then they have to walk it back, right? And I think that was something that happened with Caves and Cliffs that they have a lesson learned from. Something that was mentioned at least once, if not more, in Minecraft Live was the idea of sustainability from a development standpoint.
Yeah.
I know Agnes said it at least once, and I appreciate that. Like as someone that's an artist and as an entrepreneur, like I 100% get it. But I feel like there could be some benefit to saying, clearly like, hey, we're looking at other mobs too, or like, because if Mobs of Mayhem is really meant to be more than one, and this is pure speculation, like I'm just using this as an example, but if Mobs of Mayhem is the name of the title and you have more than one mob as an idea, we tossed around penguins as a guess, but when we were in the pre-show for Minecraft Live, like if you don't even have to name them, just say like there may be other mobs too. Like there may be other aquatic mobs coming. Like just something to get people interested in keeping up on the snapshots, in like staying in tune with Minecraft during the year, rather than, we'll say, like the average person, the average player, if they're not listening to the Spawn Chunks, which they should be, then they're tuning into Minecraft Live twice a year to get their news, right? And I feel like if you encourage them to stay on top of it more, then there'd be more to talk about. And I think they could even do little things throughout the year. Like, I mean, I love the little dev vlogs that they do on the YouTube channel, when it's not the kitty monthly Minecraft news stuff, but like the real interviews with, like, well, the kind of stuff that we saw during Minecraft Live with the sound design. Like, that was cool.
Yeah.
And if you had development stuff like that during the in-between periods, like you don't necessarily need another Minecraft Live during the year, but you could have like these little devlogs and say like, hey, remember when we said that the Mounts of Mayhem was coming? Here's something that's coming for it. And rather than just putting it in the snapshot, you could have a little announcement video to say like, here's what we're thinking, here's where it's going, here's some visuals, like that kind of stuff. They do something similar with the I can't remember what they call it, the after party, the after play, the dev,
the deep
thing
dig
they do
is what they call
deep
it.
dig, yeah. So like that is really cool, because then it shows real gameplay footage of, you know, people interacting with these mobs with some ideas about how you can use them. And I think that's good, because like sometimes when they put these things in the game, they don't necessarily during the Minecraft Live presentation explain to you the kind of things they designed them for, but then the deep dig, they show you the kind of things that they designed them for. And I think that can help inspire players. But having something like that throughout the in-between times, you know, between the Minecraft Live presentations could be more informative and interesting, and build the right level of expectation and excitement, as opposed to this huge build up for Minecraft Live with, like you said, because of the timing, not a lot to show for it.
Yeah, well, either way, they did at least show that the Copper Age is going to be arriving, and we got that little look at developer insights into some of the features, the way they'd animated the Copper Golems sort of came up a couple of times, the sound design for them, and a little bit of a showcase of their behavior as well. Plus, the shelf got a highlight, some of the other new copper blocks and stuff as well. And I think it's nice to know when it's right around the corner. So I think at the very least, the communication has been really clear as the development snapshots roll out, so that we could at least determine, yeah, we're going to get the Copper Age at this time. So with that just around the corner, any last minute thoughts before we launch ourselves into that update?
Just that I am glad I waited to update the Citadel. We hadn't really needed any happy ghasts or anything, you know, beyond the Spring to Life update. So we're still running 1.21.5 on the Citadel, and
Yeah.
so I'm just going to wait and for the few performance mods that we need to run things smoothly to update to 1.21.9, and then roll straight into the Copper Age and have access to happy ghasts and stuff like that. So I'm glad I waited. I think that it's one of the benefits of the new drop cycle, is that if there are things, for specifically, I'll say for people that run modded gameplay or modded servers, or have things that need updating in the background, if there's something about a drop that is not immediately a need for you, you can just wait for the next one. It's only a couple months, and it saves the hassle of updating like all of your mods and all of your data packs like every single time there's a game update. So I'm glad that I waited.
Yeah, I think hopefully for folks who aren't all that keen on some of the stuff that's coming in the final drop of the year in Mounts of Mayhem, the Copper Age will have enough stuff to keep you going from like a technical perspective and a building perspective, hopefully for a while. The last thing I wanted to cover about this Minecraft Live is not actually something that was announced, it's something that wasn't. We were talking a little bit in the pre-show about how we were hoping for a little bit of news about Java Edition Vibrant Visuals, which we didn't get at all. Vibrant Visuals was name-checked and used in some of the footage of some of the new features that were arriving, but ultimately we didn't hear anything about its development, either for Java or, you know, updates, improvements, or whatever to Bedrock Edition. And I was thinking about this before the show, and on reflection, no pun intended, I'm not surprised that we didn't hear anything about Vibrant Visuals for Java Edition, because I think it's quite rare at these announcement events, especially with everything being so streamlined towards we're actually announcing stuff. It's rare that they just say we're still working on it. And I think that's very much the case with Java Vibrant Visuals. It's clear that the development on that has not stalled, because they keep making changes to support it in recent changelogs. But it's all the sort of small under-the-hood technical changes, stuff like changes to fog and the way certain stuff is rendered. And it's been incremental but steady. And I think I should probably acknowledge it's probably taking a lot of technical work to make that happen, based on, the hearsay and the stuff we've heard developers say in the past about optimizing Java Edition code, whereas the work of overhauling the Bedrock Edition rendering engine had already happened a while ago. It probably happened way before Minecraft RTX was in development. So I think now we've got the notion of it coming to Java. I think some of us are maybe kind of champing at the bit to get hold of it and trying to figure out how it's going to fit into what Minecraft looks like for the foreseeable future. But I think it's still happening for Java Edition. It's just taking a while to get there, and we won't hear anything more definite until they are ready to release it.
I'm struggling to remember the language around the announcement that it was also going to happen on Java Edition. I don't recall them saying anything about it being soon, like coming soon to Java. I don't think they would have made that phrase public if they weren't sure when it was coming. If they want to announce Vibrant Visuals in a Minecraft Live, we are potentially looking at early 2026 to even know any updates on it. I hope it's not that long, because that's coming up on a year, or has it already been a year since they announced Vibrant Visuals for Bedrock, right? So coming to Java, when I feel like when you start pushing a year past the announcement, like, people start to question, like, well, is it even coming? And I think that unfortunately they might be missing out on the hype. Like, people were all over Vibrant Visuals when it was first available to test out in Bedrock. It was all over YouTube. I mean, I dived in and checked it out. But it's something where, like, if I can continue to use shaders that mimic Vibrant Visuals, like, it's going to be harder and harder to get those users to switch over the longer you wait for it to come out. So I'm curious as to what the timeline might look like. So and again, that's a really great example of something that could be shared in, like, a behind the scenes devlog in a YouTube video. I don't necessarily think that Vibrant Visuals needs to wait for the next Minecraft Live. Like, if there's news about it, I think that they could just put it out in terms of, like, an announcement video,
Yeah, the doing a quick search of Minecraft.net, the Vibrant Visuals announcement came at Minecraft Live back in March. So the version of it for Bedrock Edition had an article about it on March 22nd on Minecraft.net, and the follow-up article talking about how difficult it was going to be and, like, the road ahead for Vibrant Visuals on Java Edition was April 16th. So it's been just over 5 months. Vibrant Visuals launched for Bedrock concurrently with Chase the Skies, and since then we've only had, like, the lead up to the Copper Age, so we've had effectively 3 months since the full release of it on Bedrock Edition. So I think it's a little bit too early to say, like, Java Vibrant Visuals is, like, just around the corner, but it's also way too early to be saying it doesn't seem to be happening, because I think it seems to be happening. It's just happening a lot slower than some of us would like.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on into the main discussion this week. We do have one email that's about the Nautilus, so we're going to fold that into the main discussion about Mobs of Mayhem. So, the final game drop of 2025 brings an all-new mob out of its shell, resurrects one from the dead, or at least creative mode, and the spear also makes its debut. And we want to talk a little bit about how we're feeling. You may have gotten an overview of sorts from what we were saying in the news, but how do we want to kick this off? Should we give our overall thoughts on Mobs of Mayhem first?
Well, I mean, aside from the stuff that I've already mentioned in the news, I don't have a lot of thoughts. I will mention that I'm not a big PvE or PvE or PvP player, rather. So pretty low interest on things like the spear and jousting and mini games. Like, it's just not something that I do in Minecraft very much. So my interest level on that kind of stuff is low. I also have not recently built anything underwater. Not to say that I won't in the future. And there certainly is a lot of people in our community lately that have been doing a lot of it. So the Nautilus and those kind of things, underwater maneuverability and access and stuff like that is interesting to me. But I think the pull away from me is that as a builder, as someone that uses Minecraft to kind of creatively express ideas with no new blocks and no new textures and no new items really to fuel that creativity, the overall announcement is not a huge exciting moment for me. Not to disparage that for anybody that is into PvP, that's really excited about the spear, that is, in the middle of a giant underwater build and just cannot wait to have a Nautilus. Like, it's all great. But for me personally, it wasn't super exciting.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, kind of literally, I suppose.
Are you?
Yeah, so I'm staying in boats personally. I think boats have a significant advantage over the Nautilus because you can carry passengers in a boat, but unless you end up with a 2-player Nautilus somehow, it becomes an underwater camel instead of an underwater horse. But yeah, I think compared to an update that focuses on building blocks or redstone mechanics, I'm certainly not brimming with ideas. I'm mostly hopeful that some of the announced features are going to bring more than what we've seen showcased so far. And I don't necessarily mean they're going to drop like 3 new mobs on us in the next couple of weeks. I really doubt anything like that is going to happen. But if you consider like the refinements that were made to wolf armor as it was being produced, not just in its durability and the way that it worked, but in the opportunity to dye it and create more sort of personalized touches. Nautilus has already had Nautilus armor, so we've got that aspect covered, but the changes to lead mechanics that happened with the Happy Ghast are another example of there are peripheral mechanics that could be at play here that could cause them to revise existing features or, add like additional small features along with these mobs that could end up being a little more significant. So I'm hopeful that we'll end up with a little bit more functionality. Stuff like the spear, for example, you and I sort of spitballed the idea towards the end of it working with dispensers and there being like a spike trap kind of thing that you could use a spear for, and so potentially that's a fun way it can be implemented into stuff. I'm thinking of the stuff that you're doing with armor stands as well, like the amount of times when we were doing our tour of West Hill recently, you were showing me like blacksmiths where you had a shield leaning up against the wall and stuff like that. Like I can see the spear being used for aesthetics for people who like to have armor stand details in their worlds. You could have it like in a weapon rack or something like that, right? So there's maybe a couple of things like that that can add some detail for builders, even if you're not interested in using it that way. But like, yeah, like you, as somebody who is mainly playing in single player especially, I have no real PvE opportunities or PvP opportunities that aren't just part of vanilla survival single player. I don't have people visiting my world often enough to have a jousting tournament, so I'd have to simulate something like that by getting a zombie rider, putting a pumpkin on their head, and then just chasing them around in a circle or something. We could maybe figure out fun ways of doing stuff like that, but yeah, I'd have to get a rotating carousel of zombie horses when I inevitably, kill all of the zombies who are riding them. I doubt they have any more major features to announce, like I said, but I'm open to being pleasantly surprised. And I want to point out that sometimes we get new music, we get a new music disc. We had one of those for Chase the Skies, which was kind of unexpected, but it happened. We sometimes get more paintings and stuff like that as well, and those are usually closer to the release that they're announced, because typically the artists who are involved with those things are working on them and sort of get them in at the last minute. So there is still potential for a couple of very minor things that don't really feel like a big announcement that can be tentpole features of a gameplay drop like this, but there's always the possibility that a couple of little Easter egg things are going to sneak in later. Let's move on to talking about the star of the show, I guess, which is the Nautilus. Personally, design-wise, I really like it. I think it's a well-designed mob. It looks like pretty well-formed already. I don't really have any notes as far as the aesthetics of the thing goes. And I think my takeaway from this is that because we've had Nautilus shells for ages, it was logical in a way that the Nautilus was part of the world of Minecraft already and part of its maybe history, in a similar way to how we're supposed to dig up the sniffer and resurrect it as a mob. It sort of feels like that's being done for us with the Nautilus. We've never quite known where those shells the drowned were holding came from, and now we sort of connected the dots a little bit on that. So I like that. I like the choice of aesthetics with Nautilus armor. It was kind of fun seeing like the gold version of a Nautilus, and I can imagine a bunch of people kind of, you know, trading the armor for whichever one they like best on a server and showing off the fact that you're riding around on like a gold sea snail. Seems like a fun way of, you know, being part of this underwater community. My main problem with the Nautilus, though, I think is, functionally speaking, while I can see it being another fun option for players to use when they're building or even caving underwater, it is ultimately just an option. It doesn't feel vital to gameplay. It doesn't feel like the player is capable of anything they weren't before, because we could already swim pretty freely. I've never really had problems with the swimming mechanics post-Update Aquatic. I think they work very well. We could breathe underwater with potions or conduit power. You can dash using Riptide Tridents. You can swim faster with Dolphin's Grace. And you can mine more effectively with Aqua Affinity on your helmet or conduit power. So I see the Nautilus as neatly packaged functionality and maybe more approachable to get a bunch of those effects all in one go instead of having to grab them in from lots of different places. But it's not new functionality. It doesn't really fill a gap that the game was necessarily missing, in the way that people are likely going to compare this to the Happy Ghast. And I think it's a really different game, because we didn't really have a means to fly around in a controlled manner and build stuff in the air before the Happy Ghast. You either had to scaffold up and do it from a new version of the ground, or you had to fly past with Elytra, place one block, and then circle around and place another one or something kind of unsustainable, right? And so, yeah, I really feel like while the Nautilus feels like a natural successor to the Happy Ghast, it's fulfilling a niche that isn't really a niche at all. It's just a combination of mechanics that I think players were probably using already if they wanted to do any kind of underwater building like this.
And talking about niche uses for the Nautilus, CJ RV Williams wrote in and wanted to point out some of their thoughts about the Nautilus. Greetings, Pix and Joel. One of the things that I think could help the Nautilus mob go from an interesting aside to something more useful is a way to transport it out of water. That way, when we can take it into the underground aquifers when caving, and between bases for underwater building and terraforming. Using a lead on an aquatic mob to move it through the caves both feels like it should kill the Nautilus and would be unwieldy. The Nautilus seems too big to fit in buckets like axolotls. Do you think of a way to transport the mobs would be a good idea, and how would you implement it? Cheers, CJ. CJ died while trying to defend a newfound Nautilus from an underground army of creepers while it slowly crawled into the nearest aquifer.
Yes, unfortunately, they aren't going to survive very long on land. They're going to be the new squids, although hopefully they will beach themselves a little bit less. They certainly seem rarer than squids as well. They seem to be like solitary creatures from what we've seen. At least the showcase of them seemed to imply that was the case. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be necessarily the case that you will find them underground either. They seem like they're an ocean biome spawn rather than an aquifer, in the same way that you find glow squid basically anywhere underground.
I was thinking about this because the waterfalls in my lush cave are basically tropical fish farms. Like, they just spit out fish constantly at the bottom. So I don't know what you could do to create like a Nautilus farm. Like, if you have to dredge out some deep ocean and then create some water streams for them to spawn in. If there's a cave nearby that's still part of the biome, like if you can do it that way, like I don't know what the mechanics are going to be there. But in a similar thought to how you make squid farms, like one of the squid farms that we have on the server is an old river biome that I had to fill in the modern city, but I left a couple of shafts of water available. So it's the only place squid can spawn for quite a distance. And so we get a decent amount of squid from the squid farm. So that kind of stuff seems to be what comes to mind for a potential Nautilus farm. But when it comes to moving Nautilus around, to reply to CJ's email, I actually think a bucket makes sense. I have seen a couple of axolotls recently in my lush cave, and they're much bigger than the bucket sprite that you put them in. Same thing with a salmon. If you see a salmon in a river and you want to scoop it up with a bucket, like, it does not look like it fits in a bucket. So I don't think that it would be a stretch of Minecraft physics to put the Nautilus, which looks to be about a block and a half maybe in size, vertically, into a bucket. So like a bucket of Nautilus, or a Nautilus in a bucket, however you want to say it. The pufferfish goes in a bucket. I think it just kind of makes sense. And I hope they do it that way, because like CJ suggested, I don't want to have to drag it around with a lead, and it doesn't seem like it would be something that would survive in a boat. right? And if you need to take it over land, like I don't see that happening. So I think that it would be a better way to allow players to use it in their builds rather than having to build in an ocean. Like, what if you have a really cool aquifer cave and you want to build there? Like, how do you get the Nautilus there if they don't spawn there? Like, if it's not a deep ocean biome, then like, how do you get it there? So I feel like a bucket is probably the most, I guess, intuitive way to move a Nautilus around.
So bear with me here. SpongeBob SquarePants was after my time. I never really watched a whole lot of it, but correct me if I'm wrong, there is a character who's got like an astronaut style like bubble on their head in that show.
Yeah,
like,
Sandy the squirrel.
It's like a squirrel, right? So what if we have something like a fishbowl that we can put on our Nautilus's head, and so it gets like a little, almost like a Nautilus helmet of sorts, and then you can take them on land. And maybe they're not fast, so there's not really a benefit to taking them on land. But if you wanted to transport them, let's say you bring them with like a happy gust, and you sort of airlift them out of the water, which is a very funny image on its own. But then there is some way of the Nautilus to survive a trip through the air. And maybe if it even has like durability, kind of the same way that a zombie in the sun wearing a helmet, the helmet takes durability damage until it eventually breaks. So what if like this, fishbowl of water on the Nautilus's face runs out of water occasionally, and that's, when it starts to suffocate. I like the idea of almost like topping up the fishbowl with like a bucket or something like that, and there being a bit of a gamified approach to it, so it's not easy, but that would allow you to transport a Nautilus to, a mountain lake or an underwater cave or something like that. It's either that, or the other approach I can think of is waterlogging rails, because it's possible at least to do that, and that would make sure that the Nautilus was in water the entire time. You can do that with powered rails as well. It's just a little bit awkward, and you'd have to make sure they didn't collide with blocks on the way and that kind of thing. But that's probably the way I would do it using existing mechanics. But I like the idea of there being something new we could do with the Nautilus that would allow it to survive outside of water for a little bit longer.
And that's something that I was thinking of as an interesting way to use a Nautilus, is that if it can survive in, and we can ride it in, one block or even half a block of water would be really interesting. So thinking of how much I dislike boats, I find them visually glitchy. I don't like the quote unquote sailing experience of using them. I don't find it a good way to move around at all. If a Nautilus is easier to control in the same way that a Happy Gast is a little bit easier to control than Elytra, or a lot easier to control, then like what would be the benefits if a Nautilus would also pick up any kind of speed boosts, like ice blocks under waterlogged slabs along a long path or road? So if you needed to get around above ground with a Nautilus, you could put the Nautilus in this half block of water. The Nautilus is not going to die because it's technically in water. And then you could ride it at speed. Is there a nearby beacon with a speed boost? Like, do you have little pockets of Dolphin's Grace around? Like, you could potentially get up to some pretty high speeds in a long enough highway. Now, it's not practical in terms of moving the Nautilus from one point to another. It's more of using the Nautilus as a transport mechanic. And if it's possible, then I think it could be kind of fun and interesting, because ice boat roads are still going to have their place in the Nether, because you can't put water in the Nether, so the Nautilus wouldn't survive there. But having water like that as a way to transport around could be really interesting, especially if you're in the end. Like, if you want to move around the end islands, if you're making a permanent build, if you want just a different way to get around. There's a bunch of different things I think could be used in that way to kind of increase player speed, and maybe just an alternative to going into the Nether. Like, that kind of stuff could be fun.
Yeah. I think there's a few different possibilities, but I am curious if some of the stuff that we have already can coexist with the Nautilus. Like, right now, conduit power is the major thing for me. I sort of wonder, especially since the Nautilus shells are part of building a conduit in the first place, I wonder if conduit power gets segued into Breath of the Nautilus and they become the same effect. I think I would be happy with the conduit giving us an effect called Breath of the Nautilus. It makes more sense that way around than having the Nautilus giving us an effect called conduit power. But it effectively does the same thing, right? Because it gives you permanent water breathing. With the conduit, it's just in a radius rather than you're sitting on the mob itself. And I think it also gives you an increase to mining speed, which is something that the Nautilus at least removes the penalty for riding a mob whilst mining, which I guess is the only other benefit really to riding it and moving around, is that you can't mine as fast when you're in that sort of swimming position. You have to be like on a block. So maybe there's some sort of benefit there. But yeah, I'm not 100% sold on the Nautilus being something that we need, quote unquote, but I can see it being fun. And yeah, especially for folks like you who you're not a big fan of the boat experience, I can see the Nautilus being a fun alternative to that. And I'm wondering if they provide us a new way to not just obtain Nautilus shells, but also potentially Hearts of the Sea. Because right now, we mentioned this on the stream as well, but conduits are, in my opinion, an underrated block for a number of reasons. And one of those reasons is that if you want more than one or two of them, you have to go around raiding treasure chest after treasure chest, which can get a little tedious, and eventually those resources become depleted. So in previous Survival Guide seasons, I'm pretty sure, unless I did it on Empires, I forget exactly, but I went around raiding something like 50 or 60 treasure chests so that I could have close to a full stack of conduits by the end of it. And obviously that requires a pretty hefty drowned farm to get all the Nautilus shells. But if I want to build with them using lighting, because I think they're a really unique block to provide light to an area, I have to take out all of the treasures from around me in a single player world. Try and do that on a server if you're competing with other players for those kind of resources. It seems kind of unfair that you've got every treasure within a 1,000 block radius. So yeah, to me, I feel like it could be an opportunity to bring those items back into the foreground a little bit, especially since the Nautilus shell is clearly going to be related to this creature. I sort of wonder if there's a way the Heart of the Sea can be as well.
Where do you stand on the zombie Nautilus?
I mostly think it's going to make drowned more annoying. I think that's the main thing. And the main example they gave was that a drowned spawns on them with a trident, and so it's faster chasing you down, throwing the tridents at you, which it doesn't appeal to me in the sense of it being an irritation. I'm fine with it being more of a challenge in instances where you want a challenge, when you're looking for a challenge. Fine. I'm not certain how it's going to affect stuff like drowned farms either, but I think those will largely be okay, especially since most of them involve getting the drowned out of the water, which means the Nautilus would probably just expire. The zombie Nautilus is interesting to me because of, A, we don't know for certain that we don't get all kinds of drowned spawning on it. So you could have a drowned on a zombie Nautilus holding a Nautilus shell, and then you get a 2-for-1, a buy one, get one free, if you will. But also, the Nautilus itself, absent of its rider, is described as neutral. And so that, I believe, in the classification of mobs, means that it'll only attack you if you attack it, if it's on its own. If the drowned has gone to the surface, the drowned is burned in the sun, or the player takes out the drowned without harming the Nautilus remains neutral to you. And so at least you have the opportunity to bring them into an aquarium build, and you have a few regular Nautiluses scooting around in there, and then you have one that's clearly the old one that's been there for a while, and it's got moss on it, algae on its shell or whatever. And so it adds a little bit of character to the Nautilus that it can be zombified in the first place. And it also adds that synergy with the drowned to imagine that the two of them have this pre-existing relationship. So I think maybe for lore hounds in the Minecraft world, it's going to provide some interesting means for speculation. I feel like it could also be a good reason for it to provide Nautilus shells, because players would feel less bad about killing them than the ones that we can saddle and ride, because they feel a bit more like pets at that stage. But overall, I don't know if this is going to be a mount in the same way that the regular Nautilus is. So once again, it falling under the banner of Mounts of Mayhem. At best, it's a variant of one of the mounts, and at worst, it's not a mount at all. So I'm not certain if I'm on board with that, but I don't hate the fact that it's in the game. I think it's a fun way of expanding the Nautilus beyond just a mob that seems to lack any sort of context.
It reminds me of bioluminescent creatures from the deep blue sea, right? It's in that ilk. Minecraft has called it a zombie Nautilus, when I wonder if they could have been better off just having Nautilus variants. There's axolotl variants and frog variants. We've got frog lights in different versions. If at some point there was ever a shell block, something where you get enough Nautilus shells that you can create a block out of it, if there were different kinds of Nautilus, then you could have different color blocks.
Have a deep
I
sea
feel like
one, have like a warm ocean one. I feel like,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
a little bit like how we have warm, cold, and temperate cows and chickens and so forth now, yeah.
Precisely, right? Now, because it's a mount, that's a little bit different, but there's lots of different horse mounts. Like you can breed up different versions of horses and different speeds and stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily think that the Nautilus would need to have different speeds for different breeds, but I think it would be more interesting to call it, because I mean, just it's called a zombie Nautilus, but the drowned rides it. It's not a drowned Nautilus, and I mean, I think they could have just called it like a bioluminescent or a deep Nautilus or whatever they wanted to call it, and still have the drowned ride it occasionally. That's fine, but calling it a zombie Nautilus just kind of it just for whatever reason it just kind of feels like, all right, well, fine. Like because if I run into one in the wild, like does it still drop a Nautilus shell? Like, am I going to want to attack it? Does it attack me back? Like, what? How difficult are these things to kill? I mean, if end game it's just a one hit kill, then like that's fine, but like that's not exciting at all. So like
Yeah.
I don't know. And to your point, like I don't know if they're going to be in a problem in drowned farms, or if the Nautilus farm idea that I had earlier, like if drowned Nautilus are a problem in there, like do drowned Nautilus attack regular Nautilus? Like do they fight in the same way that piglins and zombie piglins do? Like there's just all kinds of stuff that I don't know. I feel like there's a weird afterthought to it. Like it didn't seem all that well thought out compared to even the Nautilus, right? Which obviously has. Then can we cure drowned Nautilus? You know, like if we in the same way that you can cure a zombie villager. Yeah, I don't know.
It draws into question what the zombie stuff in Minecraft actually is. Like if it is any kind of like, you know, infection based thing or whatever, and like why is the criteria for what can become a zombie you know, player, villager, Nautilus, you know, and piglin, I suppose, as well. Like there's some interesting theories I'm sure could be said about that. The other thing about acquiring Nautilus shells, which we had a comment on the VOD for our Minecraft live coverage where somebody said, you know, it sucks to imagine us breeding and killing Nautiluses for their shells, especially if they're like rideable mounts. And one of the things that our live chat is saying right now kind of echoed what I had in response to that, which was maybe if you want to get Nautilus shells, it's like the turtle breeding mechanics, where the baby Nautilus could shed a Nautilus shell as it grows, almost like a hermit crab trading up. When it gets too big for like a smaller shell, it discards one and tries to find another one or something like that. I like the idea of them dropping in those quantities. Of course, the problem then is that inevitably those turtle farms end up just either having to release a ton of turtles into the wild, or you end up killing them anyway because they're just taking up too much space. There's like, it's just full of mobs at that stage. And so how many Nautiluses are you prepared to breed, especially considering you need 8 of them to do anything? You know, if you're getting them as a decorative thing, that's one thing, but if you want to craft conduits, you need 8 of them. So it's like, it's a pretty expensive thing to just be getting them one at a time without you know, having to sacrifice a few Nautiluses along the way.
Something we mentioned on the live stream too is that it would be nice if the Nautilus sprite was actually a placeable item in the game. Like it's something that you could put down in the same way that flower pots are things that you could put down, because it would open up some decorative ideas, putting it in an armor stand or somehow getting it into an item frame or a shelf block to kind of showcase some designs, especially if you could get them in gold and diamond and iron and leather, and
I
like
mean,
the armored version
the armor
could also be, you know, could be placeable, then that could be cool too, right? But at the moment, like there doesn't seem to be anything like that, because the Nautilus shell is still just the sprite. So it's I don't know about the idea of farming Nautilus. I want there to be, I mean, I guess you could approach it like an armadillo to solve the problem of, like, you know, you could shear, I guess, a Nautilus and get a fragment of a shell, and if you have enough fragments, then you could combine them into a shell, and that would spare the, you know, the life. It'd be like a sheep farm instead of a culling farm. It would be something where you're harvesting like the natural shed of the Nautilus, or maybe they just shed bits of shell naturally, and you could just, like, if you get enough Nautilus in a tank, then what's the mechanic? Is it? Oh, I think it was course fruit. There's a mechanic where people would have the items float up to the top of the tank and then get washed off the top for a
Or
farm.
like
And
when you've got like an amethyst geode and you're like
that's what it
you
is.
turn the entire thing into a tank. Yeah.
Yeah, amethyst geode. So if you did that with like a Nautilus farm where they would just every once in a while they would shed a shell fragment. But if there's enough of them, if you get 20 or 30 of them in a large tank, then eventually there's this constant drip of shells will just allow you to create stuff. And we've got a crafter, so like maybe you could have it be automated. Like that's the kind of stuff that just creates gameplay rather than just looking at the mob going like, well, like I guess we just have to kill it to get the drop, and I agree. I think it's a weird feeling when it's a mount, because like no one would want a dog to drop anything, because then you'd have to off wolves in the game in order to get their drops, right? And it's much better to have the wolves be utility. It's much better to have the cats bring you stuff so that you don't want to off them to get a thing. You prefer them to just be alive and then bring the stuff to you. So yeah, it's a weird sort of, I guess, lack of there's not a lot of detail around the announcement. They've announced kind of like some basics, but there's not a lot of other cross pollination with existing Minecraft mechanics yet. So we'll have to see. Hopefully they come up with something.
Yeah, we'll get the details, I imagine, as they arrive in the snapshots. And actually, piggybacking off your shell fragment idea, to go back to what I was saying about how sometimes we get music and a music disc in some of these, what if they drop shell fragments by some means or another, but every now and then they drop a music disc fragment instead? And so eventually you've pieced together something like Music Disc 5, where you have to assemble it from fragments, but you've done that with fragments of Nautilus shells, and you have this like shell platter that's actually a music disc you could play. Would be kind of fun. Moving on to zombie horses. Were you aware of zombie horses before? I presume you've sort of seen them here and there as we've dug through creative every so often, but I don't know how much experience have you had with them in the past?
Only just seeing the creative spawn egg, and I think probably watching like other videos from like Exumavoid talk about them, or have them brought up as like the 10 things that are in Minecraft that no one ever talks about. Like, you just see those YouTube videos and just
giants
like,
and illusioners and
zombie horse. Sure. Like I just, and I mean, seeing it in the game, like I don't know, in a similar fashion to the zombie Nautilus, like outside of flavor, like I really don't know what the point is. Like if it doesn't survive in the daytime and you can't ride it, then why would you want it? And if it's a zombie horse, is it aggressive to you? Is it neutral? Like what's the deal? We already know that Mojang makes killing horses really unpleasant by the sound that they make in the game. It's discouraged, really. And I feel like zombie horse would also be something, even if it's a zombie, I don't necessarily want to go up and kill it. You know what I mean? Like it's a weird thing that's in the game. It's a weird addition to bring into survival. I don't know what they're thinking.
Yeah, I think this one is tricky because I think it brings up the topic of legacy features they don't want to remove from the game, but at this stage, if they don't want to remove stuff, they kind of have to justify it existing in the first place. And I think that's partly why the zombie horse has arrived. I also think, and I'll get onto this in a second, but I think it's a neat way of introducing spears through mobs, because only the zombie horsemen who arrive riding zombie horses are going to be equipped with spears, from what we know. But I think it's neat that they're finally arriving in survival. I hope to goodness that they are a rare spawn, or that they have some sort of despawn mechanic, perhaps if the rider is still on them, because with skeleton horses, they can become a bit of a pain, especially since you get 4 of them every time you trigger the skeleton horse trap, where a freshly spawned one will generate 4 skeletal riders. But once you've had a couple of thunderstorms, you get a few skeleton horses, you're like, all right, enough. I'm going to sleep through the next thunderstorms. I don't really care to have them just kind of wandering around everywhere. From what we understand of what they've said at the announcement at Minecraft Live, zombie horses are just going to be a regular nighttime spawn. And so if it turns out that it's specific biomes, I think it's just the biomes that horses naturally generate in, like plains, savannas. But then if the zombie riders burn in the sunlight, but then the horse doesn't, as far as we're aware, I think undead horses don't burn. we just end up with a lot of zombie horses roaming around at that stage, unless they have some kind of despawn mechanic where maybe they're either considered a hostile mob or they're treated the same as like a squid, for example, which isn't a hostile mob but will still despawn if you get a certain distance away from them. So unless you've tamed it, it's still going to despawn, because otherwise the only horses you're ever going to see will probably be zombie horses. I think it feels like an unbalanced thing from a gameplay perspective to spend a night in the game, encounter a couple of zombie horsemen probably, especially since they'll probably want to get them in the game and interacting with players so that players recognize that a new feature has even been added. So they'll not want to make them so rare that you hardly ever see it kind of spawn. But then if we end up with zombie horses just wandering around everywhere, it's going to really change the tone of the game for me. So I feel like maybe they'll need to put in some sort of contingency plan for not having zombie horses everywhere. But yeah, to go back to what I was saying, I think they're a really interesting way of introducing spears to players who might not be aware to craft them in the first place. I personally think that piglins would be kind of fun to have spears as well, considering their almost like hunter-gatherer lifestyle that they are simulated to have in the Nether, hunting hoglins and that kind of thing. I can imagine them having spears for stuff like that. So like a gold spear being wielded by a piglin feels like it makes a reasonable amount of sense to me. It feels like their level of technology, their level of quote-unquote society, I think that wouldn't be a bad idea, considering they're using, swords, piglin brutes have axes, they've got crossbows. I think spears kind of fits in among that number. But overall, I think the zombie horse rider is really there just to introduce the spear to players as an equipment drop, and then also, oh wait, I can craft spears in this game, and then that sort of leads them down the path of understanding that there are different tiers of material you can craft them with, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I know we talk a lot about the game making sure that it shows players what's capable in the game rather than players relying on YouTube and the wiki to go and find stuff out, which they actually joked about in Minecraft Live. But at the same time, if you don't get a crafting recipe for the spear the second that you make sticks or a sword, then like, what, do you have to pick up a spear to know how to craft it? It's the same crafting recipe as a shovel, just done at an angle. So like, it's not it's not overly difficult to craft. So to me, I feel like you probably should be aware of the spear before you see a zombie on a zombie horse. You know what I mean? I feel like you probably are going to know about the spear before your first night. Yeah. Because of the crafting recipes popping up. Yeah. So yeah, I understand, like, visually, you might not think to use a spear while on horseback, and maybe that's how they're trying to communicate it with the zombie on the back of a zombie horse. But like you, I also hope that they despawn or burn up in the sun, because skeleton horses don't. And I've got some skeletal horses that are roaming around Westhill that I can't find because they happened in, there was a thunderstorm when I was underground doing something, and then the skeletons, of course, disappear, but the skeletal horses don't. So I would rather have the control. And if you wanted the zombie horse to stay, I don't know why you would want to, but I guess you'd have to name tag it and then keep it underground, at which point I don't know what the point is. Like, they're not something that I find all that interesting or appealing. I also, to your point about, legacy things in the game, I think it's okay to remove things. If things are old and they don't work and you can't find a place for them, it's your game. You can just remove it. Like if Mojang has just decided, you know what, this has been in the game for a really long time, we can't think of a good use for it. There's no real point in keeping it. We're just going to remove it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think any objection to that would be a vocal minority that it's like, okay, guys, like, well, really, why do you want it in the game? Like, what is it that's so important about the zombie horse if it was removed that you would be kicking and screaming? Like, I can't see that being a big thing.
Yeah, that I understand from a certain perspective, especially from the sort of everyday survival game perspective. But then you could say the same thing about the petrified oak slab, which you use retextured in your world over and over again as a dirt slab, right? I imagine there are people out there who have done very creative stuff with turning the zombie horse, because it's otherwise an unused mount, into some sort of reskin block model, some other kind of mount that they use in their world, or like an add-on or something like that. And so I expect there are going to be some people out there who would be, again, a vocal minority, but really put out with the idea of them removing it from the game outright. And so the alternative is make it a more canonical part of the game proper and allow more widespread use of it. I don't think it's really harming anybody, considering that the code for it is already done. It's basically the same as a horse or a skeletal horse, and like the mechanics are roughly the same. So if they just want to bring them in survival and that unifies the theme of being around like introducing mounts along with the Nautilus, then it seems like an easy win, really. I don't see too much of a downside other than, like I said, I don't want them to be absolutely everywhere in my world after a single night's worth of letting mobs spawn.
That might be the only way that they get mayhem into the game.
That's probably the part of the mayhem, is dealing with all of the zombie horses now, or dealing with all of the fragments of Nautilus shells that you have to clean up from your oceans. Or dealing with spears, I suppose, is part of the mayhem, because of course we've already kind of said our piece about the spear in that it doesn't seem like the kind of thing either you or I are going to use for the jousting mechanics, but I think it's neat that it's a specialized weapon. And I will say that for a couple of reasons. First of all, players are going to be very wary of anything that takes up another inventory slot is designed to be a tool that you have on you all the time, right? So it makes sense that it's got a specialized, almost like physics-based thing like the mace, where traveling at speed makes it a more effective weapon. Therefore, you probably only want to pick it up in certain circumstances. You can still jab with it in the same way that you could swing a sword, but it's probably not going to deal as much damage as a sword. And also, we don't have a concept of range in attacks with melee attacks in Minecraft. I think they were tinkering with some of that when it came to the combat update snapshots that were absolutely ages ago. The stuff Jeb was testing through the Reddit about like there being attack ranges that certain weapons had, so you could keep something at bay with like a hoe slightly more easily than you could a sword. A sword was more of a short-ranged weapon. And then I could imagine a spear being like something that has a bit of reach to it. Likewise, I think the trident had a little bit more reach to it, but that didn't really seem like a mechanic that was going to stay in the game because it unbalanced melee combat in a way that they didn't feel super comfortable with. So I think, again, it makes sense that it's specialized and has this sort of unique momentum-based mechanic, because as far as it being a day-to-day weapon, the spear isn't really going to have any advantages over something like a sword or an axe.
Yeah, I can see maybe some ranged stuff getting in there, but I think that a first-person game is the wrong place for it. Like, I'm one of the first players to grab a polearm in a top-down dungeon crawler. Like, I much prefer to keep, enemies farther away, and I like the animations that usually come with a polearm. It's usually fun and fancy, and I think I used one in World of Warcraft as well. But when it comes to first-person, like, I have a hard time even now judging, how far mobs are away from me with just a sword. So like, it's not high on my list to have the spear add any kind of range. I think too that the charge mechanic that they showed, there's a timing aspect to it.
Yeah.
And so you can't just hold it down and run at something. You have to hold it down a specific time so that you know when it's ready to hit something. And so again, like, you're adding a layer of complexity to fighting mobs in the game. I don't know if that was needed. And from what I've seen in what they showed at Minecraft Live, it also seems to be pretty hard hitting, to the point where like every example they gave of jousting turned the losing opponent into a yard sale. There was no like, you took some damage. It was like, no, you're confetti right now.
Well, they were wearing copper armor, to be fair. I think
fair.
It's going to be jousting in full enchanted netherite. It's going to be a different story.
And visually, it's also difficult because when they showed people on horseback in the deep dig afterwards, I think running over like a pillager raid, they were on horseback and they had the spear lowered, and you hit the mob. I guess because we had it muted, maybe we didn't hear the sound effect of perhaps the mob death, but you drive past the mob, or you ride past the mob on the back of the horse. You don't have eyes in the back of your head, so you've got no idea. Did you damage it? Is it dead? Like, you have to turn around to find out. So like, I don't know how effective it's going to be. I shouldn't say effective. It's probably very effective. I don't know how, I guess, useful it's going to be or intuitive it's going to be in a PvE environment, when like maybe you're taking on, say, like a pillager raid. How do you know when the thing that you're aiming at has died if you're zipping past it on the back of a horse, if that's how you're using it? The jabbing, attack is fine. Again, I don't see the difference in just grabbing a sword or an axe. That's probably going to be better suited. I could see them, unfortunately, maybe making the spear more adept at taking down a Ravager or a Hoglin or something larger. Maybe because of, I mean, I guess tridents are more of an aquatic thing. I was just thinking like it might be good to use it against like a Guardian or something, because again, you're underwater. But I mean, you would think the trident would be the one that would do more damage against a Guardian. So like there's some aspects to it that could be unique, but I feel the same way about it as I do the mace, which I don't think I've ever crafted because I just don't see the need for it. And I can do what I need to do most of the time without even holding a sword or a bow. I mean, the entirety that I built West Hill, I just used my axe. Whenever I ran into a mob that I needed to deal with, that's all I did. And so the spear to me only gets really interesting if it's something that can be used in different ways. Like you mentioned earlier, the thought of putting it in dispensers. Like if you can control it with redstone, that jabbing animation, if that could be extended and retracted. Like there's all kinds of ideas, not just from like booby traps or any kind of like spiked gate, but like just decoration. Like imagine making a dragon sculpture and you've got spines that go down the back and they're all dispensers, and if you power them all in the right sequence, then like the animation of these spears coming in and out of dispensers kind of cascades down the back of a sculpture, a dragon, the teeth of a giant anglerfish build. Like there's all kinds of ideas that you can come up with creatively for that kind of stuff. So I'd like to see it have some more uses than just what they've showcased at Minecraft Live. Then I think it could be a little bit more widespread, and of course, like you said, put it in an armor stand, or where I've got the armor stand data pack, I could use it to like lean it up against a wall and create some flavor and some ideas. It does come in different materials, so like diamond and gold and things like that, so that's cool because it can add some color. I love the idea of piglins having spears. I feel like they did in the Minecraft movie. I don't have any specific visuals in my head, but I just feel like they didn't all have the same weapons. I feel like they, as a giant mob of piglins in that movie, I'm sure they gave them a bunch of various different things.
Yeah, it just seems to fit their sort of style, I guess. But I think the other thing that's going to be curious to see from, especially the perspective of new players who join Minecraft after this point, is people finding out there's a spear and assuming that you can throw it, assuming it's like a javelin kind of thing, and then turns out, no, that's the trident that happens with. And so maybe like the spear as a weapon might not suit what people expect a spear to be used for in that context. And to that end, I wonder if there's a possibility for it to be modified slightly in its behavior by enchantments in the same way that the trident is. Because if you enchant a trident with Riptide, you get the pullback and throw of launching yourself with it, as opposed to loyalty, which is the one that has it come back to you after you throw it. So I wonder if maybe there would be something that you can enchant the spear with that turns it into a throwing weapon instead of a charging weapon, and you sort of have to choose between the two, in the same way that with the mace you have to choose between one that breaks armor and one that just deals more damage depending on your descent velocity. So there's potential there. And I was also wondering to what extent the spear could use pre-existing enchantments because of the bloatedness of the enchanting system. I sort of wonder if specialized enchantments like Quick Charge, for example, which only applies to crossbows, could be used for the charge animation for the mace, for the spear, so that it can be like lowered faster to tilt at somebody if you're jousting, or whatever the charge attack is. I like the idea of then having sharpness is an option, because that I think only applies to swords and axes, but you could have that on spears as well. Or alternatively, it could have some of the trident enchantments, but couldn't do stuff like Riptide and channeling. Maybe it could do impaling, because that's trident specific, but only works on aquatic mobs, and so you'd have to do a bit of investigation to figure out why impaling and sharpness were two different things dealing with mobs on land. But then impaling could make it really useful when raiding a guardian monument if you don't have a trident already. I think there's maybe opportunities for enchantments from all over the shop to be brought into the spear, instead of doing what they did with the mace and giving it a couple of additional enchantments that are either treasure finds or have to be gotten through the enchanting table or trading, which just means more and more enchantments that you don't want when it comes to getting stuff like Unbreaking and Efficiency that are more universal.
Yeah, I was even thinking that the enchantments on the spear could kind of make it almost like a trident mini, like because you can craft the spear, but the trident you kind of have to collect, right? Like it'd be like a stepping stone to the trident, or not anything as common as Unbreaking, but there was an enchantment that I just had in my head a minute ago and I've lost it. But it would be neat to have one of those enchantments, maybe make it more useful against larger mobs. Like you said, impaling, like against a piglin or a hoglin rather, or a ravager. That could be interesting. I don't know. There's something about the spear too that I find odd in its animation. Like I understand the lowering it if you're on a horse because that's typically how jousting would work, but I don't know if that necessarily reads in a first person as I'm pointing this aggressively at the thing in front of me. It kind of looks like you're pointing it at the ground, and there's definitely a weird disconnect between how big the spear looks in your first person point of view compared to how big it looks when you're looking at another player holding it. It's much longer than you see in your hand, and I'm sure there's other weapons that do that too. Like I think that the first person view is definitely tweaked to work within this confines of the screen as a video game compared to it being like the sword being a realistic size as to how it actually looks when another player is holding it. I know there's two different versions of how the weapons are scaled depending on how you look at them, but with the spear there's like a little bit of a different color at the bottom of the sprite, which looks like the base of the sphere, but the same color when it's in your hand is in the middle of the spear. And so there's this weird connection between like, well, it looks like at first visually you're holding it by the butt. Like it doesn't look like you're holding it in the middle. It looks like you're holding it by the very bottom, which wouldn't make any sense at all. So there's something visually about it that just doesn't seem to make sense to me. And I mean, that's the kind of thing that they might refine over time, but I don't feel like it's really all that intuitive to use. And I mean, I've said a number of times on my stream, and I'm sure on this show, that like I find that PvE melee first person is really difficult, and it's maybe more of a me thing because I'm sure there's lots of video games that do it, but I've never found that it was intuitive for me in a first person game to have a sword or spear or anything and be able to judge how far away something was in front of me in order to hit it. And I can see the same thing being a problem with the spear. And I just remembered knockback. If the spear had knockback just on its own, like if you didn't have to enchant it, if one of its jab features was like it just naturally knocked something back, that kind of like is the opposite of it having more range and being able to keep something at range, which didn't work out in those PvP changes. But it would be able to keep something at range naturally because it would have that knockback. So it'd be very useful against creepers in the early game because if they came up too close to you, you could push them back before they explode, that kind of idea.
Yeah. Especially since it's such a cheap weapon to create. I think obviously like you can make a sword very easily too. Like it doesn't require more than a couple of cobblestone to get started. But I do think there's potential in that for people who want to create like a diamond spear. You've got one diamond, then that's what you've got. I think there are pros and cons to some of this stuff. It's interesting for us to have more of a mixed opinion on new stuff coming to Minecraft these days, especially since we're getting it so frequently. But I think it's really interesting to get a variety of opinions on this. So we'd love for listeners to write in and let us know what you think about some of these announcements, especially if you are more inclined towards combat in Minecraft. Share your thoughts on the spear. We'd love to hear from you. For now, folks, I think that is where we're going to wrap up this discussion here on this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today day over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, consider putting some value back in. You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat, where you can already start chatting and sharing all of your opinions about the stuff in this announcement. You also get to participate in the monthly hangouts that we have, where we share what we've been up to in Minecraft, and the community shares what they've been up to in Minecraft themselves. We also do our live recording every Monday in Discord, so you can sit in on one of those and see what it's like to make this show behind the scenes. We currently have 277 patrons, which is up one from last week, but there is always room for more. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. The show is available on Mondays on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. There's video versions on YouTube and Spotify. Don't forget that Patreon is now synced with Spotify as well, so if you want to listen to the render distance, you can do it there. The email for the show is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page, and that's where you get the render distance, the extended version of the program.
My name is Johnny, but I'm not go by Pixel Riffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, doing behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series, and this week I'm going to be checking out Hades 2, now that's in 1.0 release. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which will be having its finale episode this week as they wrap up Season 10. You can find us through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixel Riffs on both Instagram and Blue Sky. Joel, where can people find you online?
I will point everyone towards the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. There is a new episode in the hopper right now. We talked about a bunch of new trailers that are coming out soon. Things like Avatar, Fire and Ash, that's coming out in December, and the new trailer for The Mandalorian and Grogu, which is coming out later in 2026. So look forward to that. I am Joel Duggan on social media, very easy to find. I'm on TikTok as Joel Duggan as well, posting clips of the Lego builds I do, the streams that I do, all happening over on TikTok. And speaking of streams, twitch.tv/Joel Duggan. I am hard at work on the new sci-fi area, still working on some stuff in Satisfactory. And like I said, the Soundwave build is happening on Fridays right now. So check it all out at twitch.tv/Joel Duggan.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite. Mount up.